The zoo planet, they called it Planet Zillion. A small hot world with 2 suns and no oceans. But this place had cages. Hundreds of them. And inside those cages were humans. The aliens called them ferals. Wild. Stupid. Dangerous. They were not allowed to speak. Not allowed to learn. They were just animals, shown off to alien tourists like pets in a zoo. But not all humans were the same. In one dark corner of the zoo, behind a steel gate, sat a man named Rai. He was quiet. Too quiet. While others screamed, cried, or banged their fists on the metal bars, Ray sat still. He watched. He listened. His eyes followed the guards, the machines, the strange alien signs. The aliens began to notice him. "That one," said a blue-skinned guard with 6 eyes. "He watches too much. Maybe he's broken," another joked, tossing leftover food into the cage. But Rai wasn't broken. He was waiting. Each night, when the stars appeared above the glass dome of the zoo, Rai whispered to himself. Not English, not any Earth language, strange sounds, soft and deep, words he had never heard before. Yet, somehow, he understood them. One night, an alien technician walked by and paused. She leaned closer to Ray's cage, frowning. "What did you just say?" she asked. Ray didn't answer. He only smiled. Suddenly, the lights above flickered. Pop! One of the floating drones watching the cages sparked and fell to the ground. The technician jumped back, eyes wide. "That's not possible," she whispered. "You didn't even touch it." Rai leaned forward. His voice was calm. He whispered one more strange word, and the drone melted into the floor. Across the control room, alarms started to blink. "We have a breach," shouted a guard. "Section 4 drone offline. Cause unknown." They checked the cameras. They saw nothing but Rai, sitting alone in his cage, smiling. "Move him," ordered the zoo commander. "Send him to the lab. He's dangerous." The next day, 4 guards in black armor came to take Rai away. The other humans growled and tried to fight. But Rai said something soft. One word. Everyone, human and alien, froze. The guards stared at him in fear. One of them dropped his weapon. "He spoke," the guard whispered. "A word of power." Rai was taken to a white room filled with machines. Bright lights hurt his eyes. Scientists poked him, scanned him, took his blood. "Maybe he has a virus," said one alien doctor. "Maybe it's changing his brain." Or, "Maybe," said another, "he's learning the divine tongue." Silence filled the room. Only the highest alien priests knew that language. The language of gods used to control energy, matter, even life itself. A human speaking it? Impossible. And yet, here was Rai. Later that night, alone in his lab cage, Rai spoke to the shadows. "You called us beasts," he whispered. "You locked us in cages. You watched us like animals. But we listened. We learned. Now, we speak." In the shadows of the lab, something moved. A small device, or a listening bot, floated closer. Rai looked up at it, smiled, and said one word. The device stopped moving. Its lights turned red, then blue, then off. Dead silence. Outside the lab, the stars continued to shine, but deep inside, the zoo planet, something had changed. A human had spoken the divine tongue, and the galaxy was about to hear it. Whispers of fire deep inside the cold metal walls of Lab Sector 9. Everything was silent. Too silent. Cameras blinked. Lights hummed. Softly, alien scientists moved like ghosts behind thick glass, watching the human in the center of the room. Rai sat alone in a new cage. This one was smaller, cleaner, surrounded by glowing machines. His hands were cuffed. His neck had a metal collar, yet he didn't struggle. He was smiling. The head scientist, Dr. Kelt, stared at the monitor. His fingers trembled. Show me again, he whispered. An assistant replayed the footage from the night before. The moment Rai had spoken a word, and the drone had died. No weapons, no tools, just sound, just language. But it wasn't just any language. He used the divine tongue, Kelt muttered. A sacred word, and the machine obeyed. How? The assistant asked. That language is locked inside our DNA. We are born with it. Humans are not. Kelt didn't answer. He was afraid. Rai sat motionless, but inside his mind burned like fire. The words had come to him like dreams, like memories from another life. But now, they were alive, and he could feel them. Every time he whispered one, the air changed. The world listened. He wasn't sure why, but he was starting to understand how. That night, alone again in the lab cage, Rai closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, the forests, the sky, his sister's face, the taste of rain. The cage felt smaller suddenly, like it was closing in. So he whispered. A new word. It echoed softly, but the walls heard it. A crack appeared in the floor beneath him. Lights flickered wildly. The collar around his neck sparked, then unlocked with a sharp click. Freedom. Outside, guards rushed in. One aimed a pulse rifle. Down! He shouted. Rai stood slowly, hands open, his voice calm. Don't, he said, not in English, in something else. The rifle melted in. The guard's hand screams filled the lab. Another guard raised a baton, but Rai only looked at him and said a single syllable. The man fell to his knees crying. Not in pain, but in awe. He commands. The guard whispered, shaking. Sirens rang. Metal doors slammed shut. Red lights flashed across the lab. Rai turned and saw the scientists watching him behind the glass. He raised one hand. They backed away. He didn't attack them, didn't shout. He only spoke two more words. Words that made the walls tremble, that made the glass shimmer like water. And then he stopped. Deep below the lab, in a hidden chamber, a high priest named Soval watched it all. His skin was silver, his eyes pure black, and across his chest was carved the ancient symbol of the divine tongue, a language only taught to 10 beings in the galaxy. Zoval had trained for 50 years to learn just 3 words of it, but this human had already spoken 5. How can this be? He growled. He is not just repeating sounds, his assistant said. He understands them. No beast should understand the words of gods. Zoval replied. He stood tall and angry. Bring me to him. Back in the lab, Ray sat once again, not in a cage now, but in a white room surrounded by energy fields. A new visitor entered. Tall, glowing, powerful. Zoval. He didn't speak right away. He walked in a circle around Ray. Then, in a voice heavy, with pride, he said, Do you know who I am? Rai nodded. You're afraid? Zoval's eyes narrowed. You speak power you do not understand. No, Rai replied. I understand it better than you do. Then show me, the priest challenged. Rai stood. Around them, machines began to record. Energy flickered across the floor. The duel wasn't physical. It was verbal. A battle of words. Zoval spoke first. A word of command. Ray's body froze for a moment, locked in place. The air thickened like oil, but he whispered back. A word of breaking. And the spell shattered. Zoval growled. He shouted a stronger word. One of pressure. The room shook. Walls cracked. Rai struggled to breathe. His lungs felt like stones. But then, he closed his eyes and whispered a word of flame. A ring of fire burst around them, lifting him off the ground. His eyes glowed. Machines sparked. Power grids failed. The fire didn't burn anything. It danced like light around his body. Zoval stepped back. This was No longer a zoo experiment. This was awakening. Outside, across the galaxy, humans in other cages looked up. They had felt something. A whisper, a fire, a change. The trial of beasts. They thought the show would break him. They thought pain would remind him that he was still a beast. They were wrong. The arena was massive, a perfect circle made of black stone and golden spikes. Thousands of alien citizens filled the seats. They laughed. They cheered. To them, this wasn't punishment. It was entertainment. A human was going to fight. Not just one, but many. A message had spread across the stars. One of the pharaohs has spoken the divine tongue. The aliens didn't believe it, so the leaders announced a test, a trial. Bring them to the pit. If they survive, they are more than beasts. If they die, they are what we always believed. Rai stood in the center of the arena. He had no armor, no weapons, no shoes. The metal collar had been placed back on his neck, sealed with thick energy cuffs around his wrists, but he wasn't afraid. He looked up at the crowd and saw only fear behind their fake smiles. The announcer's voice boomed. Today, the creature known as Rai will face the blood beasts of Vekor. If he lives, we will listen to his words. If he dies, his kind returns to silence. The gates opened. 3 massive beasts crawled into the arena, 10 feet tall. 4 arms each, eyes like burning coals. They were not machines. They were not trained. They were pure hunger. The crowd cheered. Ray didn't move. He looked to the side where other humans were chained. 5 of them. Children, elders, prisoners. They were brought to witness the punishment or become part of it. The guards pushed them forward, laughing. You want to speak, beast? One shouted at Rai. Then save them. The first blood beast roared and charged. Rai waited. He could feel the crowd holding its breath. Then, he whispered. A single word, old and sharp like stone. The earth beneath the beast cracked. The creature fell to its knees, confused. Its claws dug into the ground, but it couldn't rise. Ray whispered again. This time the sound rang like a bell through the air. The chains around the other humans unlocked and fell to the sand. Gasps echoed across the arena. He's controlling the field, someone shouted. The second beast rushed in, jumping high into the air. Ray did not look up. Instead, he spoke a word with breath and silence mixed, a sound no one could copy. The beast froze mid-air. Time slowed. The crowd watched, speechless, as the beast hovered like a statue in the sky, then dropped to the ground like dead weight. No blood, no scream, just stillness. The third beast circled him, growling. This one was smarter. It didn't charge. It studied Ray, sensing something greater than muscle or fire. Ray looked at it calmly. He didn't speak this time. He placed a hand on the ground and breathed. The air around him shimmered. The beast whimpered. Then slowly it backed away, not in fear but in respect. And then it knelt. Silence fell across the arena. No one clapped. No one cheered. Only whispers now. He commands them. He didn't kill them. He led them. What kind of creature is this? The announcer tried to speak but choked on his words. A message flashed across all screens in the stadium. A security override. It was from Priest Xoval. Stop the trial. Return the human to containment. He is not ready. But it was too late. Rai turned toward the highest seat in the arena. The royal box and alien generals, nobles, and priests sat there staring. He raised his hand, and the sky above them darkened. Thunder without clouds. A pressure in the bones. A storm that wasn't real, yet fully there. Ray's voice echoed across the arena. You wanted to test me. You wanted me to die in front of your people. But today your people saw the truth. You don't control the divine tongue. You only borrowed it. He turned and looked at the humans behind him. Our chains are illusions now, and illusions can be broken. As he walked out of the arena, the blood beast followed him, head low, like a loyal dog. The crowd stayed silent, but the galaxy was screaming. The first rebellion, the fire didn't start with guns. It started with a whisper. After the arena trial, the aliens didn't know what to do with Ray. He had passed their test, but in doing so, he had destroyed the very idea they believed in, that humans were beasts. The High Priest Xoval wanted him executed. The generals wanted him studied. The public wanted to believe that what they saw was a trick, so they moved him to a secret fortress, underground, hidden beneath the ice plains of Velderos. No windows, no sound, only guards and machines. But something had changed, not just in Rai, but in other humans. When he spoke the divine tongue in the arena, others had heard it, not just with ears, with something deeper. A spark had lit across the human soul, a memory that didn't belong to them, but felt like it always had. The language of creation was waking inside more than one person now. In cage room 7B, a 14-year-old girl named Mila sat with her eyes closed. Guards thought she was praying, but she wasn't. She was listening to words forming in her head, soft, strange, beautiful. When she whispered one, her cage door clicked. In another section, an old man named Omar stood and said one phrase. His weak knees suddenly grew strong. The pain in his back vanished. In lab room 12, a boy with burns on his skin spoke two unknown syllables. His wounds began to heal. The divine tongue was spreading. The alien scientists didn't know. Not yet. They had isolated Rai, placing him inside. A chamber made of anti-energy glass, resistant to all known weapons, all known languages. But the divine tongue wasn't known. Not fully. They didn't understand what happens when sound becomes meaning, and meaning becomes force. Inside his chamber, Rai sat still, eyes closed. He could feel Mila, feel Omar, feel the whispers growing like sparks in the dark. He placed his hand on the glass wall and spoke one word, not a loud one, not even angry, just true, and across the fortress, everything opened, doors unsealed, lights died, weapons jammed, hundreds of humans, bruised, starved, hopeless, suddenly found themselves free. At first, they just stood there. Is this real? Mila asked. Then someone ran. Then another. Then a voice shouted, "This is our chance!" In the control tower, alarms exploded. Breach in Sector Delta. Containment failure. All cells unlocked. A commander screamed. How? Who gave the command? No one did. The language did. Rai walked through the smoke-filled hallways barefoot, fire dancing around his fingers. Guards aimed at him, but their guns wouldn't fire. He didn't even look at them. He had no army. And yet behind him, a movement began. Mila walked with him. Omar followed. More joined. Silent, united, angry, and awake. A young human soldier, one who had never spoken a divine word, stepped forward. "What do we do?" he asked Rai. "Fight them?" Rai turned, looked at the rising crowd. "No," he said. "Free them." At that moment, a black-armored elite squad entered the corridor. 20 alien warriors trained to kill rebels in seconds. Rai stepped forward. He didn't lift his hand. He didn't shout. He just whispered 3 words. The air around the soldiers bent, twisted, turned. They fell to their knees, not in pain, but in remembrance. "Do you hear it now?" Rai asked softly. "Even your blood knows this language." Back at the fortress command, High Priest Xoval watched the chaos. His hand trembled on the control panel. "They're not killing," he whispered. "They're converting." Outside the fortress, escape ships flew into the night sky, not in fear, but in victory. For the first time in history, humans were no longer prisoners. They were speakers, and they carried more than freedom. They carried a weapon that no army could block, a language that rewrote reality, but deep in the stars. Something ancient stirred, a force that once created the divine tongue, It had been silent for 1,000 years. Now it had heard the humans speak, and it was watching. The divine duel far above any world, past dying suns and forgotten moons, floated a city of light, Karelos, the temple of tongues. It was not built. It was spoken into being, created by the first words ever known. Only the high speakers were allowed here. Beings older than time, masters of the divine tongue, guardians of reality itself. And now, they were afraid. "A human speaks our words," said Elder Sorrow, his voice like thunder wrapped in silk. His skin was cracked gold, his eyes hollow with wisdom. "And worse," he added, "he speaks them correctly." Around him, ancient beings sat in silence. Only one dared to speak. "I will face him," said a figure dressed in black flame. His name was Kareth, the Duel Master, the only living soul to speak a word that once killed a star. He stood slowly. The human must be tested, not with questions, with language, with truth. Meanwhile, Rai stood aboard a stolen alien cruiser, staring out at a spiral nebula. Mila stood beside him, her voice shaking. "We've done so much already," she whispered. "Maybe it's enough?" Rai didn't answer. His eyes were distant. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from what he had remembered. The divine tongue wasn't just words. It was history, pain, and power combined. Each phrase touched something older than the stars. "There's someone waiting for me," he finally said. "He's not here to kill me. He's here to find out if I deserve to live." The ship landed on a black platform that floated in empty space. No sky, no sound, just shadow and starlight. Kareth was already there, tall, silent. His breath made the space around him ripple. No guards, no weapons, just two speakers, one ancient, one new. This was the duel, not of body, not of strength, a duel of tongues. They stood 10 steps apart. Kareth spoke first, one word, and suddenly, the platform grew massive, stretching for miles. Time slowed. Gravity shifted. Ray's body felt like it weighed a mountain. Kareth had just said, "Expand." Ray nearly collapsed. Blood trickled from his nose, but he smiled. "You start with pressure," he said softly. "I'll start with memory." He whispered a word no one had spoken for 1,000 years. Instantly, the stars above them replayed the trial arena. A full memory played in the sky, glowing with truth. Kareth narrowed his eyes. "How do you know that word?" "I didn't learn it," Rai said. "I remembered it." Kareth frowned, then raised both arms. He roared a sentence of 5 burning syllables. The platform caught fire, not with heat, but with emotion, guilt, sorrow, rage. Every step Rai took burned with feelings from every human cage, every tortured memory. Rai screamed and dropped to one knee. Kareth stepped forward. "This is what your kind carries," he said. "You are not ready to shape reality. You still bleed when it cuts." Rai looked up, breathing hard. The flames danced in his eyes. Then he whispered 2 words. He forgave the fire. Instantly the pain vanished. The emotion melted away. "We bleed," Rai said, "but we don't break." The duel shifted. Kareth said, "Erase." Rai said, "Restore." Kareth said, "Darken." Rai replied, "Lighten." Each word shook the stars. Ships far away lost their balance. Machines glitched, minds cracked open, and still they continued. A duel of existence. Finally, Kareth stepped back. His body was shaking, his flame dim. "You are not just a speaker," he said. "You are becoming something worse." "What?" Rai asked. "A writer." Silence. Even the cosmos seemed to hold its breath. Only one being had ever earned the title of writer, the one who first created the divine tongue. To speak was to command. To write was to rebuild reality. Ray didn't understand it yet. But something inside him did. A third language. A deeper voice. Hidden, but waking. Kareth knelt, not in defeat, but in warning. They will come for you now, he said. Not soldiers, not priests, not kings, the true ones, the architects. Rai nodded slowly. Let them come. Behind him, Mila and the others watched in silence. The duel was over, but the war of words was just beginning. Rise of the speakers, it didn't begin with an explosion. No fire, no war cry, no marching armies. It began with a whisper on a cold, quiet morning, a word spoken by a child on a mining planet. She had been sick for weeks. Her bones were weak, her breath thin. Doctors gave up. But then, as she lay under metal blankets, she whispered something. Her mother didn't understand it. No one did. But the machines around her flickered, and her heart began to beat stronger. The girl stood up, eyes glowing softly. She smiled. I dreamed of fire. I dreamed of light. Now, I remember. Across the galaxy, it was happening everywhere. Man in a factory shouted a strange word when a machine broke down, and the gears fixed themselves. A soldier, captured and beaten, whispered a command in the dark, and his chains melted. A group of prisoners wrote unknown symbols on a prison wall, and the wall turned to dust. They were speaking without training, without teachers, but with memory, because the divine tongue was not being taught. It was being awakened. They called themselves speakers, and soon they were everywhere, on broken space stations, on desert worlds, in farms, labs, old colonies long, forgotten by the alien empires. They weren't soldiers. They weren't organized, but they were connected, not by radio, not by message, but by words that pulled at the fabric of the universe. The aliens tried to stop it. They banned the language. They burned humans who spoke too fluently. They jammed frequencies, destroyed ancient records, even hunted down Rai himself, placing a bounty across 100 systems, but it was too late. The words were alive now, and the more they tried to kill it, the louder it grew. Rai knew it was spreading. From the edge of a ruined moon, he watched an encrypted broadcast, a child speaking the word for shield and saving her village from a meteor storm. They're not scared anymore, Mila whispered beside him. No, Rai said. They've remembered what we were always meant to be. But not everyone was ready for what came next. In the core sector, a council of ancient beings gathered. They called themselves the true architects, silent rulers of reality, beings who had created the divine tongue billions of years ago. They had gone to sleep when the galaxies were still young, but now they were waking. They are not supposed to speak, one said. We sealed that knowledge inside bloodlines, inside stars, and now the humans have cracked it, another added. Without permission, without cost. The oldest one, known only as the Null, opened its eyes for the first time in 40,000 years. Then we will remind them what happens when beasts try to rewrite gods. Back on the human rebel fleet, Rai stood in a circular chamber. Behind him, hundreds of speakers, young and old, waited silently. On a table in front of him was a single stone tablet, glowing softly. He placed his hand on it. The light grew, lines appeared, ancient writing that had no meaning until now. And then Rai spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. We do not want war, we do not want blood, but we will not be silent again. His voice echoed across the entire ship, across nearby systems, through the strange language of the stars. It reached every speaker, no matter how far, and in their hearts, they felt one thing: readiness. On a snowy colony, 3 farmers stood up and whispered words of heat, and the ice melted around their fields. On a prison planet, a blind man shouted a forgotten phrase, and every lock opened. On a deep space station, a janitor raised his hand and said, "Light," and saw stars no one had ever seen before. The architects saw it too. They're not just speaking, said the Null. They're building. A new reality was being shaped, not with warships, not with bullets, but with language and humans, once thought to be beasts, were now rewriting the rules. Rai stood at the center of the fleet, eyes closed. In his mind, he saw the future like a storm. A final word was coming, one that hadn't been spoken since time began. A word that could create or erase everything. Mila touched his arm. What happens now? Rai looked up at the stars. Now, they come for us, and we speak. They called us beasts. Space was quiet. But something was coming. Not a fleet. Not an army. A will. Something older than stars. Something that once whispered galaxies into being, and could now speak them out of existence. Above the human fleet, the sky tore open like paper. Shape poured through, vast, endless, impossible to describe. Its body was not metal or flesh. It was meaning. It was a sentence given form. This was the null, the first architect. It had no eyes, no mouth. Yet it saw everything, and it spoke in a voice that bent light and crushed logic. You were born to obey, not to speak. Your words are stolen. Your awakening is a mistake. Rai stood alone on the speaker's platform. Behind him, thousands of humans, each one glowing with fragments of the divine tongue. Some had learned 5 words, others 10. Rai had crossed 100. But what came next was not about power. It was about truth. We were caged, Rai said softly, eyes fixed on the void. Called beasts, called ferals, called less. He stepped forward, wind swirling with no air. But we learned. Not because you allowed it. Because we remembered what you forgot. The null responded with a single word. Silence. And the stars went out. Entire systems blinked into blackness. Ships stopped working. Humans gasped. Some fell to their knees. The words in their minds, the divine tongue, were shaking, breaking, but not in Rai. He stepped forward and whispered one word. New word, never spoken before, never written. A word born from pain, love, rage, hope, and memory, and with it, the stars returned. Mila cried out. What did you say? Rai answered, but no sound left his mouth. Instead, every human felt it. The word was not sound. It was inside them now. And with it came power. The divine tongue had always been external. Now, it was theirs, not borrowed, not stolen. Reborn. The null screamed. It released 1,000 words at once. Reality bent backwards. Ships cracked. The void opened and unwritten things crawled out. But the speakers, children, elders, rebels, janitors, all stood together and they spoke not alone, as one. 10,000 voices. A single perfect phrase. You called us beasts, but beasts cannot remember creation. The words didn't just push back the null, they rewrote it. The sentence that was the null began to unravel. Its shape flickered, its voice shattered. And then, it simply became a comma in the air, and vanished. The stars blinked, then burned brighter than ever. Across the galaxy, machines long dead began to glow. Plants bloomed on dead worlds. Languages once lost returned to ancient walls. Humans didn't conquer the architects. They did something worse. They surpassed them. Months later, on the rebuilt temple moon of Zillion, once a zoo, now a sanctuary, children learned the divine tongue in schools, not as a weapon, but as a song, a story, a way to create without chains. Ray sits beneath a tree, watching new words form in the air like butterflies. Mila stands beside him, holding a tablet. They want to know what to call this new language, she says. Ray smiles. Call it what they once called us, he replies. Beast speak, she laughs. Isn't that insulting? Rai shrugs. Not anymore, because now it means something else. Power born from silence, order shaped from memory, and a voice that finally belongs to us. Echoes beyond the tongue. It started with silence, but not the peaceful kind. This silence was wrong. Deep in the outer systems, far beyond the reach of star maps, a listening station, manned by human researchers, picked up something strange. Not a signal, not a sound, but the absence of everything. Whole region of space had gone, missing. No stars, no debris, no black holes, just nothing. Like someone had deleted the paragraph from reality. The technician, Juno, tried to scan it. Her equipment burned. Her blood boiled. She screamed not from pain, but from understanding. Before she died, she wrote 3 symbols on the floor with her own hand. None of them were part of the divine tongue. Across the galaxy, Rai felt it. Not as a sound, not as a word, but as a contradiction. He sat up from sleep, heart racing. "They're not using the tongue," he whispered. "They're using something older." In the capital city of Zillion, speakers across the planet collapsed. Children stopped speaking. Their tongues refused to form words. Elders wept without knowing why. It was as if language itself was retreating. Mila, now the lead keeper of the tongue archives, called an emergency gathering of high speakers. "This isn't suppression," she told them. "This is unwriting. Someone is not just attacking our language. They are attacking the very idea that speech ever existed." Then came the first message, burned into the side of a moon. Not written, erased. A section of the moon's surface was just gone. No rock, no dust, no history, and in its place, a blankness shaped like a symbol. No one could read it, not even Rai. He stood before it, staring, his voice barely audible. "This isn't a word. This is a rejection of meaning." For the first time, Rai felt something the divine tongue couldn't fix. A hole. Not a place, but an idea. Something that made reality itself question whether it should exist. Then the dreams began. Across every human colony, people began dreaming of a tall figure with no mouth and too many eyes. It walked between stars. It didn't speak. It deleted not objects, not people, but moments. In one colony, no one remembered being born. In another, every book turned blank. In another still, names began to vanish from memory. Mila recorded one survivor saying this: "They're not enemies, they're not gods. They're the ones who come after the last word is spoken. They are the editors." Rai called them the erased beings that predate speech, creatures of the void before sound. Not chaos, not order, but removal. He gathered the speakers once more. "We once used the divine tongue to shape," he said. "Now we must find a way to protect it. Not from war, not from silence, but from the void that eats meaning itself." He reached deep into the sacred archives, places even the architects had feared to look. And there, he found something. Ancient, not a word, not even a whisper, but a punctuation, a mark so powerful it had been locked away for eternity. The symbol of continuation, used not to end sentences, but to prevent them from ever ending. The symbol was called the anchor, and Rai spoke it. The ground cracked, a star blinked once and then refused to die, somewhere, far in the void. A scream rose. Not of pain, but of recognition. The erased now knew. The speakers were no longer just using the divine tongue. They had discovered its counterpart. The war for meaning had begun. But this time, there would be no battlefield. Only stories, memory, and the question, can a voice survive when the universe forgets what listening means? The forgotten tongue, the first sign came from a dead planet, one that no longer appeared on any map. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It simply stopped being remembered. People who had lived there had no memories of it. Their families didn't recall their names. Photos turned blank. History archives froze, not erased, but hollowed. When investigators went to where the planet should have been, they found only a black stone floating in space. On it, etched deep into its core, was one word. Oh, no one could read it. Not even the divine tongue could translate it. And that was the first time Rai felt fear. He held the image in his hands, but the moment he looked away, he forgot what it said. Every time he blinked, the word changed shape. Mila tried to copy it. Her pen snapped in half. Her voice cracked when she tried to speak it. "It doesn't belong to us," she whispered. "It doesn't even belong to reality." Rai called the Council of Speakers, the last one he would ever call. "There was a language before ours," he said, "older than the divine tongue, not meant to create, not meant to destroy. It was used to unmake. Across colonies, people were dreaming again. But these dreams weren't messages or visions. They were reminders of things no one should remember. Entire families dreamed the same word. People began speaking sentences they had never learned, phrases that made plants rot, glass crack, babies stop crying and just stare. They were repeating the forgotten tongue. No one knew where it came from. Some said it was older than sound. Others said it was written in the spaces between atoms. But one thing was clear: it could not be controlled. On a quiet planet called Sevra 9, a priest who once taught the divine tongue tried to chant a protective phrase. He spoke 9 perfect words of shielding, and the moment he finished, his mouth disappeared from his face. His body remained alive. But his language, gone. Rai realized something terrifying. "They're not just erasing planets," he said. "They're erasing the capacity to speak, to think, to tell stories." He went to the last library of the architects, a place hidden behind gravity fields, light mirrors, and paradox locks. There, buried in a sealed glass cube, he found it. A book, not made of paper, not glowing with power, just dark cloth. Hand-stitched. Title: Before Words Were Born. He didn't open it at first, Mila said. "What if reading it is what lets them in?" He answered. "Maybe we're already infected. Maybe we're not fighting a war. Maybe we're a story that's being edited slowly." And then he opened it. The pages didn't hold writing. They held feelings: regret, hunger, memory of not existing. On the last page, there was one word, only one, and Rai didn't speak it. But the moment he read it, he remembered something that never happened. He had seen this place before, a world without stars, a language that wasn't learned. It was absorbed, like poison. He remembered standing in front of something that couldn't be seen, hearing a sound that didn't echo. And it had said to him, "You are not the first speaker. You are just the first one to survive remembering." Rai snapped out of it. The others in the room had collapsed. Mila was coughing up ink. The pages of the book had turned blank. Only one sentence echoed in his mind: "If you remember too much, the universe forgets you back." From that moment, Rai knew the divine tongue would not save them now, not alone. They would need to speak something new, not to command, not to fight, but to resist the forgetting itself. He whispered to Mila, "It's not a war of weapons. It's not even a war of words. It's a war of memory. And we are one sentence from being erased." In the distance, in the uncharted zone of forgotten systems, the void opened again, but this time, no being stepped out. Instead, a voice was heard in every mind across the galaxy, in every tongue all at once. "Your story ends here," and across the stars, every written word began to fade.